Be me, 26, feminist, live in a nice one-bedroom apartment downtown, the kind with floor-to-ceiling windows and a gym in the basement that I tell myself I'll use. I'm an HR manager for a huge logistics company. Think trucks, warehouses the size of small towns, and an army of guys in high-vis vests. My job is mostly about policies, performance reviews, and fostering a positive workplace culture. That means I spend my days in a climate-controlled office with an ergonomic chair and a ficus plant I named Brenda. My reality is emails, Zoom calls, and spreadsheets filled with key performance indicators and employee satisfaction metrics. A few months ago, we had our quarterly operations meeting. I was presenting a new wellness initiative, PowerPoint slides with smiling stock photos and words like synergy and holistic well-being. The warehouse manager, a tired-looking guy in his 50s, chimed in. He said his team was struggling, that the pick-and-pack targets were too aggressive, and guys were reporting back injuries. I put on my best HR smile, the one that's friendly but firm. I told him the targets were aligned with industry best practices. I suggested the real issue was probably improper lifting techniques. Maybe we could schedule a mandatory workshop on ergonomics. We could even subsidize gym memberships to encourage core strength development. I saw him just stare at his screen on the Zoom call, then slowly nod. He knew he wasn't going to win. I felt a little pang of victory. Efficiency and policy over anecdotal complaints. That's how a modern business is run. Later that week, a driver named Gary sent me an email. He'd been on the road for 4 straight days, hit his 14-hour limit twice, and was asking for an extra day off to recover before his next long haul. I checked his record. He was technically within the legal operational limits. His request was based on feeling burnt out. I typed up a polite but standard rejection, mentioned the current driver shortage, and the importance of meeting delivery schedules. I remember leaning back in my chair and sighing. It felt like the men in this company were always complaining, always finding a reason why they couldn't just do the job. I posted in my private group chat with my female colleagues. Just had to tell a driver he can't have a day off because he's tired. Imagine if these guys had to deal with our reality for a week. They wouldn't last a day. The chat filled with laughing emojis and messages of agreement. It felt good. A little bit of solidarity in a world of male drama. The company threw a corporate party a while back. One of those cheap and cheerful events in a rented-out conference room with a cash bar and a bad DJ. I was having a glass of white wine, chatting with some people from accounting. Eventually, I found myself in a circle with a few of the drivers and warehouse guys, including Gary. The topic somehow turned to work-life balance. I made a comment, something about how office stress is a unique kind of exhausting, the mental load, the emotional labor of managing people. One of the guys chuckled. Try loading a 50-foot trailer in the middle of July, then talk to me about an exhausting day. I couldn't let that slide. I said that the whole idea of men's work was an outdated social construct, that any reasonably fit woman could do what they do, and probably with less complaining. They all just looked at me. Not angry, more amused. That's when Gary spoke up. He wasn't smiling. He just looked me dead in the eye and said, "Talk is cheap, Jane. Why don't you prove it?" The whole circle went quiet. He said, "One day. That's all I'm asking. Work a single shift on the warehouse floor with the crew, from clock in to clock out. Then you can tell us how easy it is." All eyes were on me. The guys, my colleagues from the office, everyone was waiting to see what I'd do. Backing down would mean losing face completely. I'd be the HR lady who talks a big game but can't back it up. My pride took over. I lifted my chin and said, "Fine. I'll be there Monday morning. What time's check-in?" Gary just nodded slowly. Shift starts at 8. Monday morning came way too fast. My alarm went off at 6:30 a.m. It was still dark outside. I put on my best yoga pants and an expensive athletic top. If I was going to do manual labor, I was going to do it with moisture-wicking technology. I got to the warehouse, and the sheer scale of it hit me. It was a giant metal box under a gray, overcast sky. The air smelled like diesel fumes and damp concrete. The noise was the first thing I noticed inside. A constant deafening roar of machinery, beeping forklifts, and the rumble of conveyor belts. The shift supervisor gave me a high-vis vest and a pair of steel-toed boots that felt like they were made of lead. They were scuffed and worn. I wondered how many people had worn them before me. He also handed me a scanner gun and a pair of work gloves. My station was on the inbound receiving line. A massive conveyor belt brought in a steady stream of boxes from newly arrived trucks. My job was simple: grab a box, scan the barcode, and stack it on the correct pallet based on the code that popped up on my scanner's screen. The boxes weren't huge, but they were dense. Books, machine parts, canned goods. Most were between 20 and 30 pounds. For the first half hour, it was almost fun, a novelty. I was moving, I was active, I was proving my point. I smiled at the guys working next to me. "Not so bad," I shouted over the noise. They just grunted in response, never breaking their rhythm. Grab, scan, stack, grab, scan, stack. A human machine. By the 1 hour mark, the novelty was gone. My arms were starting to feel heavy. A dull ache was setting up shop between my shoulder blades. The athletic top was a mistake. I was sweating, but the warehouse was cold and drafty. The boxes just kept coming, an endless river of brown cardboard. I tried to keep up with the pace of the men on either side of me. They moved with an economy of motion I couldn't replicate. No wasted steps, no hesitation. Their bodies were just programmed for this. Mine was not. 2 hours in, the pain started. Not just an ache, but a sharp burning sensation in my lower back every time I bent over. My hands, even through the gloves, were raw. The rough edges of the cardboard were like sandpaper. My legs started to feel shaky. I looked at the clock on the wall, 10:15 a.m. I had almost 8 hours left. A wave of panic washed over me. There was no way I could do this for 8 more hours. But I couldn't quit. I absolutely could not quit. I would never hear the end of it. So I just put my head down and kept moving. Grab, scan, stack. Lunch break was at noon. A bell blared, and the entire warehouse seemed to power down in an instant. The sudden silence was jarring. I followed the stream of workers to the break room. I collapsed onto a plastic chair. My hands were shaking so much I could barely unwrap my sandwich. I looked down at my palms. Even with the gloves, they were red and puffy, with the beginnings of blisters forming. The men around me were eating quickly, methodically. They weren't laughing or chatting. Most were just staring at their phones or off into space, conserving energy. No one looked at me. I was an outsider, a tourist in their world of exhaustion. I managed to eat half my sandwich before the bell blared again, signaling the end of the break. Getting up from that chair was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Every muscle in my body screamed in protest. The afternoon was a blur of pain. The fatigue was like a physical weight on my body. My brain felt foggy. I started making mistakes. I put a box on the wrong pallet. The line supervisor had to come over and yell at me over the noise of the machines to fix it. His face wasn't angry, just exasperated. I felt my cheeks burn with shame. I was slowing everyone down. I was the problem. The boxes seemed to be getting heavier. My grip was failing. I almost dropped one and had to awkwardly hug it to my chest to save it. My confident smile from the morning felt like a memory from another lifetime. All I could think about was the clock. Watching the second hand tick by felt like physical torture. Around 3 p.m. it happened. I reached for a particularly awkward box. My muscles screamed, and my grip just gave out. The box, full of what felt like bricks, tumbled to the concrete floor, the corner splitting open. I just stared at it, frozen. I didn't have the energy to even bend down. One of the younger workers, a kid who couldn't have been more than 20, stopped what he was doing and came over. I braced myself for a sarcastic comment, a smirk, and "I told you so." But he didn't say anything. He just effortlessly picked up the heavy box, tucked the broken flap back in, and placed it on my pallet for me. Then he looked at me, and in his eyes, I saw something that broke me. It wasn't anger. It wasn't amusement. It was pity. It was the look you give a small animal you find struggling on the side of the road, a gentle, sad, and slightly condescending sorrow. He knew I was out of my league. He knew I was in pain. He knew I didn't belong here. And that look, that single moment of unsolicited compassion, felt more humiliating than any insult. It was a confirmation of everything I had spent years denying, that there was a difference. And in this place, on this day, I was on the wrong side of it. He gave a small nod and went back to his own work, leaving me standing there, completely shattered. The final hour of the shift was an out-of-body experience. I moved on autopilot. My body was a machine that was breaking down, but it hadn't stopped running yet. When the final bell rang, I almost cried with relief. I dropped my scanner on a bench and practically limped towards the exit. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. I couldn't even look at them. I got to my car, a nice, clean sedan that looked completely out of place in the gravel parking lot full of old pickup trucks. I fell into the driver's seat and just sat there for 10 minutes, not moving. My hands were trembling on the steering wheel. My back was a solid knot of pain. A fine layer of cardboard dust covered my clothes and my hair. I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. My face was pale and smudged with dirt. My eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. I looked like a ghost. Driving home, every little bump in the road sent a jolt of pain through my spine. When I finally got back to my pristine apartment, I stood in the middle of my living room and just looked around. The quiet, the clean air, the soft couch. It felt like a different planet. I had survived one day, and I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that they would all be back there tomorrow, doing it all over again. I woke up the next morning feeling like I'd been in a car crash. Every single muscle ached. Getting out of bed was a 10-minute process of careful, strategic movements. My hands were the worst. Red, swollen, and decorated with angry blisters on the palms and fingers. Just making a fist was agony. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. The ghost from yesterday was still there, but now with dark circles under her eyes. My first thought was to call in sick, to just curl up in bed and pretend the whole thing never happened. But my pride, what was left of it, wouldn't let me. Quitting after one day on the warehouse floor was one thing, but I had told them I could do their jobs, and a warehouse was only part of the operation. A stupid, stubborn thought took root in my exhausted brain. I'm not done yet. I grabbed my phone, my fingers fumbling with the screen. I found the number for the transport supervisor. I told him I wanted to ride along on a delivery route for the day, to see the full picture. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear him thinking, "Is this woman crazy?" But he just said, "Okay. Be at the dispatch depot at 9. We'll put you with a courier." The dispatch depot was even more chaotic than the warehouse floor. A frantic ballet of vans, drivers shouting, and scanners beeping. The weather had turned. A cold, miserable rain was starting to fall, turning the asphalt yard into a sea of puddles. They paired me with a quiet, middle-aged driver who introduced himself, but I immediately forgot his name. He was just a face under a worn-out baseball cap. He didn't seem thrilled to have me along. He just pointed to the passenger seat of his small delivery van and grunted. The van was old, the heater barely worked, and the passenger seat had a permanent sag. It smelled of stale coffee and wet cardboard. The first few hours were a dizzying sequence of short drives and frantic dashes through the rain. I thought my job was to just watch. I was wrong. The driver handed me a smaller scanner and a stack of packages. "You take the odd-numbered houses on this street. I'll take the even." So I spent the morning running from the van to people's doorsteps, trying to shield packages from the rain, my aching body protesting every step. My nice yoga pants were soaked through in minutes. The cold seeped into my bones. Navigating the city from the perspective of a delivery driver was a nightmare. Endless traffic, no parking, one-way streets that the GPS didn't seem to know about. We had to double park constantly, earning us angry honks and shouted curses from other drivers. Every stop was a race against the clock. Find the address, find the package in the back of the van, run to the door, get a signature if needed, and run back. There was no time to rest, no time to think, just constant stressful motion. By lunchtime, we were already behind schedule. We ate greasy burgers in the van, parked in a loading zone, the rain hammering on the roof. The driver barely spoke. He just ate his food and stared out the windshield with a look of profound resignation. I realized this wasn't a bad day for him. This was just a day. The afternoon brought the moment I wouldn't forget. We were running about 20 minutes late for a delivery in a nice suburban neighborhood. The delay was because of an accident that had shut down a major road. Not our fault, but the customer doesn't care about that. I was the one who had to take the package to the door. It was a large, awkward box containing some kind of kitchen appliance. I trudged up the long, pristine driveway, the rain plastering my hair to my face. I was shivering. A woman in her 40s, wearing expensive-looking athleisure wear, opened the door before I could even ring the bell. She didn't say hello. She just launched into a tirade. How she'd been waiting all day. How her entire schedule was ruined because of our incompetence. How she was going to call customer service and file a formal complaint. I stood there on her porch, soaking wet, cold, and exhausted, holding her heavy package, while she yelled at me. I tried to explain about the accident, but she just talked over me. "I don't want to hear your excuses. Just give me my package." I handed it to her. She snatched it out of my hands and slammed the door in my face. No thank you, no tip, just pure, unadulterated rage. I walked back to the van in a daze. As I climbed back into the passenger seat, a memory hit me so hard it felt like a physical blow. I remembered sitting in a meeting just a few months prior, looking at a report on customer complaints. I had made a comment to a colleague. Some of these courier complaints are so dramatic. It's just a late package, not the end of the world. I had laughed. Sitting there in that cold, damp van, I wasn't laughing anymore. By the time we finished the route, it was dark. My whole body felt like one giant bruise. But the stubbornness wasn't gone. It had morphed into something else. A strange, masochistic need to see it all the way through. When I got home, I didn't even shower. I called the warehouse supervisor. I told him I wanted to work the night shift, sorter. He was clearly shocked. "Jane, are you sure?" "That's a 12-hour shift, from 10 p.m. to 10 a.m. I told him I was sure. I think he was too stunned to argue. Showing up at the warehouse at 10 p.m. was a surreal experience. The same place, but it felt different, more intense. The night crew was a different breed, quieter, more haggard-looking. You could see the permanent fatigue etched into their faces. The noise was the same, but in the dark, it felt more oppressive. The bright fluorescent lights seemed to hum with a frantic, sleepless energy. My job was on the main sorting line, a massive, high-speed conveyor belt that carried thousands of packages. My task was to read the destination code on each package as it flew by, grab it, and toss it into the correct massive bin behind me. The speed was insane. There was no time to pause. The packages never stopped coming. One every 2 or 3 seconds. Miss one, and it screws up the whole system. The first couple of hours were manageable. My body was screaming, but the adrenaline and the sheer focus required kept me going. But around 1 a.m., the exhaustion hit me like a tidal wave. The air in the warehouse was freezing cold. I couldn't stop shivering. My eyes started to burn from staring at the endless stream of packages under the harsh lights. My hands, already blistered, were now being scraped and cut by the edges of the cardboard boxes. I stopped feeling the pain and just registered a dull, constant throbbing. Around 3:30 a.m., I started to lose it. My vision was blurring. My reaction time slowed. I missed a package, then another. A supervisor had to come over and switch me to a slower, less critical task, stacking empty plastic totes. It was a demotion, and I knew it. But I was too tired to even feel embarrassed. I don't remember much of the next few hours. It was a monotonous hell of lifting and stacking. My mind started to wander. I looked at the men around me. Why were they doing this? I knew the answer was money, obviously. But this was more than just a job. This was a physical sacrifice. Were they doing it for their families? For a mortgage? To put their kids through school? What kind of life did you have when you spent your nights in this cold, loud, punishing place and your days trying to sleep while the sun was up? All those times I had sat in my comfortable office, reviewing their pay scales and benefits packages, I had never once considered the reality of what that money cost them. It wasn't just their time. It was their bodies, their health, their sleep. Around 4 a.m., I felt like I was going to collapse. I told the supervisor I needed a 5-minute break. I stumbled towards the restroom, my legs feeling like they were made of wet cement. The restroom was just a concrete box with a few stalls and a dirty sink. I didn't even bother with a stall. I just slid down the wall and sat on an overturned bucket in the corner, putting my head in my hands. I was trying not to cry. I was just trying to breathe. The door opened, and one of the other workers came in. It was Jeffrey, a guy who looked to be in his late 40s, with deep lines of exhaustion around his eyes. He saw me huddled in the corner. I expected him to ignore me, or maybe even laugh. He just walked over to the vending machine, fed in a few crumpled bills, and got a can of some cheap, high-caffeine energy drink. He walked over and held it out to me. I looked up, confused. He gave me a small, tired smile. "Here," he said, his voice raspy. "Don't worry about it. You're not the first person from corporate to think this is easy." He sat down on another bucket near me and let out a long sigh. "We get tired too," he said, looking at the concrete floor. "We just got used to the fact that nobody's really listening." He didn't say it like a complaint. He wasn't asking for my sympathy. He said it like a simple statement of fact, like saying the sky is blue or the floor is concrete. It was the truth of his world, and for the first time, I heard it. I really, truly heard it. I got back to the office the next day, or rather, the same day, after a few hours of what couldn't be called sleep. I showered, put on my professional office clothes, and tried to cover the dark circles with concealer. Walking through the office felt like stepping into another dimension. The quiet hum of the HVAC system, the smell of coffee, the soft carpet under my feet. My hands were so sore I could barely type. My back was a solid wall of pain. In the hallway, on my way to get coffee, I ran into them. It was Gary, the driver from the party, and a couple of the other guys from the warehouse crew. They were there to pick up some paperwork. They stopped when they saw me. They all looked at me, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and expectation. I could see they were waiting for the punchline, waiting for me to make a joke, to admit defeat, to say something sarcastic about my little adventure. I opened my mouth. The old me, the me from 4 days ago, had a dozen snappy comebacks ready, but they wouldn't come out. I looked at their faces. Then I looked down at my own hands, at the raw, blistered skin peeking out from under my cuffs. I looked back at them. My voice was quiet, barely a whisper. "Thank you," I said. "Thank you for what you do." I walked past them without another word, heading for my office. I could feel their eyes on my back. I heard one of them mutter, "What was that about?" I didn't look back, but in the stunned silence I left behind, I knew something had fundamentally changed. Not just for them, for me.